You just never know what's going to happen during a game. 95% of the prep and the work and the research that I do goes out the window every week. I'll be over on one sideline and a guy will go into the tent and I'll hear my producer in my ear saying, run to the other sideline. We got a player over there that just went into concussion protocol too. We can't keep track of all these players that are getting injured. The seriousness and how they're not letting guys go back out there severely injured. I think that's helping players to be able to play the game a lot longer. I've definitely noticed a huge difference since I've been getting adjusted in my whole body. I feel like I've been sleeping better and just overall my body feels more balanced. I got some custom orthotics in my shoes, which have been great. We're getting another pair for my athletic shoes. It's been awesome. Whether you have a desk job or not, we are all glued to our phones all day long looking down. I have a reverse curve in my neck. It's probably a lot from doing that. Whether I'm walking around on the sidelines or walking around anywhere, I'm usually looking down at my phone, checking my emails or my Instagram. It's so amazing how these days we all have what you call tech neck, where our neck is just constantly forward and our shoulders are then holding extra weight of our head. I'm taking care of my body like a professional athlete, practicing what I preach.
Hey, fitness and health fans, it's game on with another episode of the Sporting Good Posture podcast. Get Coach Marghella's advice from the sidelines as he helps you crush your game, no matter what health or fitness game you play.
Hey, I'm Coach Marghella. I'm sporting good posture. What are you sporting?
Hey, Coach Marghella, what's your advice today?
Welcome back to another episode of Sporting Good Posture. This is Coach Marghella here, and I have a really special guest today, Melanie Collins. She's actually a patient at the office, but she is also a reporter for CBS, and she does the sideline reportings for the NFL. She teams up with Greg Gumbel and Trent Green. She also hosts on the Golf Channel, the Big Break and the Driver versus Driver show on there. And then she's also a former employee at ESPN and Yahoo Sports. And she's covered many different sporting events over the years, from the World Cup to the Super Bowl, NCAA football championship, and many other things. And it's really a pleasure to talk to you today because I'm so interested in how this works with the sideline. And again, I want to welcome you to the show. And thanks for taking the time today.
Of course, my pleasure.
So you joined CBS last year, and you do the sideline reporting and everything. And it was interesting because I asked you about how they do the questioning and the material and everything. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about how that actually works? Because I was under the assumption that they basically pre-planned that, but you were telling me something different.
Yeah, so I think you're kind of in the majority of the general public in assuming that as sideline reporters, we get fed all of our questions and all of the reports that you hear from the sideline are given to us. It couldn't be further from the truth. Sideline reporters are, I would say, they just dig so deep throughout the week to find their own unique stories. And we have such a different job from the play-by-play and the analysts. First and foremost, our job is to provide people with eyes and ears on the field. So the things that they can't see at home and that the guys up in the booth generally can't see. And that's, of course, injuries and certain things that are going on down on the sideline. That's our number one job. But throughout the week leading up to the games, we are constantly researching, going through the roster, finding, we're looking up injury history so that when, for example, the starting tight end goes down with a knee injury, we can say, oh, he dealt with an injury on this same knee 2 years ago during training camp. Or we can look back in that history and kind of paint a picture as to the history of the injuries for that player. We're also looking for cool, unique stories. For example, I just saw that Myles Garrett of the Browns has been training with MMA this summer, and it's helped him with his hand positioning and stuff like that. So different cool stories that we can kind of bring to light. And I think the booth can tell a lot of those too. Our main job is really just to keep you informed as to what's going on down on the sideline and how the coaches and the players are interacting. But we like to add in some of that fun story stuff too. But we come up with all of our own questions for pregame interviews, pregame reports, halftime interviews with coaches. Those are all our own work, at least at CBS, at my network. I can't speak for other networks, but as far as I know, it works the same way for the other sideline reporters out there. But yeah, post-game interviews, I'm in the final 2 minutes of a game coming up with, what I want to ask. And a lot of times that game comes down to the final second or the final 20 seconds, and you don't even know who you're going to speak to yet. So I can have kind of in my mind, well, if the Steelers win, I want to speak to James Conner afterwards. Or if the Patriots win, I want to speak to Tom Brady. And you kind of plan in your head what you're going to ask if that team wins. But it's hard because you're thinking on your feet, within a couple seconds, they're bringing that player over to you post game. But yeah, I think you're not alone, Frank. thinking that we don't do a lot of our own work, but it is not true. We work very hard as sideline reporters, and we come up with all of our own material. So we always have to be very prepared and informed.
That's impressive. I'm a huge sports fan, and you definitely passed the test when I've talked to you because you know your stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I grilled you a little bit about fantasy football and just other sports in general. I mean, you were coming up with names that I couldn't even remember when we were talking recently about that. So you definitely know your stuff, and it's cool to see that. And it's interesting to hear that you do come up with all that on your own. And it's interesting how that process works towards the end of the game, because it does change hands so much at the end of the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work, but I enjoy coming up with my own stuff. It's more fun for me, and I feel like you learn the landscape of the sport more when you're the one that's delving into everything and kind of writing everything down and doing the work, as opposed to someone kind of emailing you a printout of the storylines for the team and here's what we're going to talk about, here's the questions you're going to ask. You don't really retain the information then. So for me, I think just personally it makes me better as a host and better as a reporter and just smarter in terms of the sport and being able to discuss everything just by doing the work myself.
Definitely. So as you've done this for a number of years, what are you noticing about some of the trends of the injuries that you're seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like specifically with the NFL, so much of the talk lately has been surrounding concussions, and that's just what everyone's been so interested in lately because, the whole CTE craze has happened in the last few years where we're discussing, whether or not CTE is real and how it's affecting players later on in their lives. But when you really delve into some of the data and what I've personally seen on the sideline, the most common injuries in the NFL seem to be knee injuries and foot and ankle injuries. I know knee injuries have topped the list since year 2000, whether it's ACL, PCL, MCL, and then foot and ankle injuries. I think it's due in large part to the improvements in cleats, and they lead to better performance, but they're lighter and stable. Players are getting bigger and stronger every year, and there have been a lot of advances in surgeries and rehabilitations that have helped players return quickly. But the whole injury prevention thing kind of seems to remain a significant challenge. And I think you and I have talked about that a lot in terms of orthotics, and we don't really understand why the league and players themselves don't do more with that, because it seems like they could prevent a lot of these injuries. And then I think concussions come in after those injuries, but it's mostly, the knee, foot, and ankle injuries that I've seen, whether it's Achilles, or we've heard a lot about the Linz Franck injuries lately, or the Jones fracture. Those sort of things are becoming common speak in injuries. So
they've done a lot to address the concussion issue. Unfortunately, I think it's, sometimes I feel like it takes away from the game a little bit because I feel like you can't even hit anybody at certain times during the game. But I understand that they're really trying to keep these guys on the field because ultimately, if the star quarterback goes down, that team is not as fun to watch on offense. And I'm sure that you've seen that where some of the games where these guys are hurt, or you're watching the game and they just don't seem like they're on the same page, is because a lot of these guys are injured or playing injured, or there's backups in, and it just kind of takes away from some of the games.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think with concussions, it's nice that the NFL has made some rule changes, and just being down on the sideline when a player appears to be concussed or like his bell was rung, there's an independent spotter upstairs that can now call down if no one else on the field notices. I had a game, my first ever game in the NFL was actually 2 falls ago, and it was Ravens-Bengals. And Joe Flacco went down hard, and
I remember that.
Yeah, no one really saw it, but then an independent spotter from upstairs called down and said, it looked to me like Joe Flacco hit his head off the turf. We want him to go into concussion protocol. So they grabbed him off the sideline. He had to go into the medical tent and pass concussion protocol before he could return to the field. And I think that's a great rule, and I think it's really helping players to not return quickly when they've suffered a concussion. But it just seems like there are so many other ways in which the NFL can kind of help out these other injuries. It's great that we're paying so much attention to concussions, but it seems like the league itself and the teams would want to keep their players on the field, and more so than just with concussion issues.
Yeah, because a lot of these knee injuries are usually non-contact.
Right.
And they'll be, they'll go take a handoff and they'll make a cut and boom, they go down, nobody hits them, and they got torn ACL. And a lot of it goes back to, poor footing, whether it's the field conditions can sometimes come into it, but more or less it's their feet. They have imbalances in their feet, like flat feet and previous injuries that are now causing the whole chain to be unlevel.
Yeah, and it seems like with so much of the evolution to the playing surface technology these days, with the artificial turf and more traction, shoes are getting lighter, they're less stable, and then the forces on their ankles and feet are just too high, both on a traumatic injury front and a chronic injury front. It just seems like we're moving in the wrong direction in preventing those injuries because players are just getting bigger and stronger. And you're right, it's all the non-contact stuff. It's just a quick plant by a running back or a juke move, and all of a sudden they go down with an Achilles injury. So I'm just curious what you think could improve that. Is it an issue of custom orthotics? If all these guys had orthotics in their cleats, do you think the numbers would go down significantly?
Honestly, I really do, because we've seen it in other sports, like just Kevin Durant just a couple months ago. We've seen it with Kobe Bryant, but like these Achilles injuries, and even like Andrew Luck right now has that calf injury. And I really feel like, even though he keeps saying it's not his Achilles, that he's going to come back and probably he's going to end up having an Achilles problem. And I do really think it stems from the feet. And for some reason, they haven't evolved to actually addressing that problem with these athletes. And it would be a very simple fix for these cleats or for their, tennis shoes, running shoes, basketball shoes, whatever it is. But that's creating the imbalances. And over again, these also, they've had ankle sprains, they've had knee sprains, and possibly surgeries on these lower body parts already. And now it's not the same as it was before. And I do think that's a big factor in why these guys keep getting hurt. The other thing I think is that they've cut down on the amount of training camp they do, especially in football. Mm-hmm. So these guys aren't conditioning like they used to, where they'd be starting, in June. Now they're basically showing up in July, and they do a little bit of a mini camp in June, but then they have, about a month and a half off, and then they start showing up, and then a week and a half later, they're starting to play games.
Right, and a lot of them are sitting out all the preseason games now.
Yeah.
Players.
And, at some point, maybe they'll address that where they cut down on the preseason games. Maybe they're talking about adding on to the schedule. But either way, I think the collective bargaining agreement that they've done on the recent one really it protects the players, but also I feel like it's affecting their health. And I think it's also affecting the product on the field, where sometimes these guys, it takes a month into the season before they're kind of gelling and on the same page with the offense and even with the defense. Like, you'll watch. So at the beginning of the year, you'll see a lot of these higher scoring games. The first half of the season. The second half of the season, it'll be a lot lower scoring games where the defense finally caught up with the offense, and now everybody's kind of on the same level playing field, and you'll see the scores not so high the second half of the year. Plus the weather gets a little bit cold, and I think that plays a factor in it too. But these guys definitely come off these injuries. They're always going to come off too soon. When you're an athlete, you want to play. So whether you're hurt or not, you want to go out there, you want to help your team. And,
sure.
Most of the time, I think these guys, they're going to play unless someone holds them back. So like you said, it's good to have that spotter for a concussion, because these guys will go back in the game, and it's scary to see them when you see them out there and they're just stumbling and falling down.
Yep. Yeah, it is scary to watch. And, you made a good point, and you mentioned Andrew Luck. I think the interesting thing to notice about him is he is one of those players that is going to want to come back and play. But he said last week in an interview that he was like, if I come back right now, I'm going to be a very average player. And he wants to play 100%. But what he also said is that though it is a calf injury, he said he's feeling it in his ankle. And I think that's something that's really interesting. When an injury starts with the foot, it can also affect the ankle, it can affect the Achilles, it can affect the knee. And I think even you have shown me in my own self how like my off-balance arches have caused me to have knee problems or whatnot. So I think it's interesting how, just your arch being off can affect all four of those parts of your lower leg. And how that can chronically continue to affect a player. You look at Todd Gurley, for example, and he's got that arthritic knee. You just wonder if he'll ever be the same player again, or if he's going to constantly deal with issues until he takes care of the balance in his feet and his arches.
So the foot problem leads to a shortening of the Achilles and a shortening of the calf muscle. And when it's shorter and these guys are sprinting and going full speed, something's going to tear. It's just, It's not meant to be short and then go in these explosive moves. So over time, through previous injuries or poor arches, it shortens those. Plus a cleat is not going to be as, have as much motion as possibly like just a regular shoe, or if somebody was barefoot. I think it also goes back to, we're always wearing shoes. Whether it's you're a man or a woman, you're always wearing shoes since the time you're born now. no one's really walking around barefoot enough. So you don't develop enough of the muscles in your feet and your lower body. So you start immediately wearing shoes. They never fully develop. And a lot of times it causes atrophy of those muscles. And then you're already predisposing yourself to an injury, whether you're an athlete or not. It's going to make those muscles shorter. It's going to make them tighter and bigger chances of injuries.
So why do you think the NFL and other leagues haven't kind of gone in the direction of orthotics, and why they've banned them in some senses? Why do you think that is?
I think that it could be just from the production of these shoes. Like, so when they have these cleats or these shoes, these guys will sign contracts, and I feel like they're supposed to just wear whatever they give them. But I feel like if they just addressed just the insert of the shoe itself, I feel like if they just added some extra supports, because if you look at most shoes, they only have the support on the medial side, which is the inside of the foot. They don't have anything in the middle, like by the ball of the foot or behind the ball of the foot, and they don't have anything on the outside of the foot. So ultimately, most people will still have that arch on the medial or the inside part of their foot. They don't have it on the middle and on the outside. And I feel like if all they did was address some of that and also did some barefoot workouts with these guys. Like, I knew a guy he was a former Olympic athlete, and he would go down to the beach and run in the sand, or go to like a playground and run in the sand and go on the track and practice barefoot. And I feel like if these guys did more of that, like for instance, Andrew Luck should probably be doing some barefoot movement with his feet, so that without shoes on, so that he can build up some of those muscles again and work his way up to sprinting. Because if you can sprint barefoot on the beach or, on a track, then you can definitely do it when you have cleats on.
Yeah, it sounds like I
feel like it's the training.
Under Armour and Nike and get a deal going with these guys for their
Seriously, I would love that. I mean, it just amazes me that it hasn't been addressed yet, because I feel like it's a basic thing. Running shoes that came out in the 70s were made more to propel you forward. And it basically means that your foot is not doing what it's supposed to do. It's atrophying. It's basically the shoe is doing part of the work. So your foot is going to go forward anyway, whether you push it or not. So if they made these cleats better, and I've seen some golf cleats actually where I even think maybe Tiger Woods and a couple other guys have used that, where there is a little bit more give to the cleat. There's more motion, where it's not going to stick in the ground and then you tear your ACL or something. It's going to actually give a little bit. I've even seen where they've possibly developing field turf that gives when you run on it, where it takes some of the impact out of that. So if you make a cut, you're less likely to just tear your Achilles or your knee. If you've been predisposed to that, it'll give and it'll let you go a little further. And I think if they did that in all sports, there'd be a lot less problems, especially in football.
Yeah, well, with how they've kind of moved in the direction of protecting players against concussions, you have to hope that maybe that's the next step, that they're going to start to see the trends in these, foot, ankle, knee, Achilles injuries, and hopefully jump on board with that too.
I think they will. I don't know. I think they're still stuck on the concussion thing, and I think they've addressed it pretty well, actually. I think it's really gone down.
In my opinion.
And, they've cut down on with kickoffs and kick returns and punts. So it's definitely, they may even go to the point where they don't even do that anymore, because that's where a lot of these concussions are taking place. But when you're out there and you see this going on, what do you notice the most that's changed, like on the sidelines, when you get a chance to be out there as opposed to, maybe years ago?
Yeah, I think there's just much more attention paid to injuries in general. There's much more caution being taken regardless of the injury. They have these sideline medical tents now, and they have a full training staff down there on the sideline, and they'll keep players out. They don't want to risk it, whether the guy wants to go back in or not. So I think I've just noticed an overall just a growth in the way that they treat injuries on the sideline, and just kind of how they handle the whole process, specifically with concussions. You'll see a guy go in the tent and he won't come out for another 3-4 minutes before the guy's telling me, okay, he's cleared, or you'll see him walk off into the locker room for further testing because he didn't pass concussion protocol. So it kind of makes my job interesting, because I'll be over on one sideline and a guy will go into the tent into protocol, and I'll hear my producer in my ear saying, run to the other sideline. We got a player over there that just went into concussion protocol too. We can't keep track of all these players that are getting injured. There's just so many injuries in football. But in terms of, just how they're treating them specifically on the sidelines, I couldn't really tell you how many differences I've seen, just because I've only been doing NFL sidelines for a year now. But yeah, I think there's just much more attention paid to it, and much more attention to detail to the injuries.
like from watching at home, it seems like they are. Or even if you go to the games, like I can tell that they are taking more time for that because these guys, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, these guys would just go back in the game.
Oh, I know.
With concussions or major injuries, and they didn't care. They just said, go out there and play. And I think they are taking a little more, better approach at holding them back.
Yeah, and even off the field, players themselves taking a better approach in terms of their recovery and their rehab and their conditioning. I think now we're seeing players that are able to prolong the career so much further because of the advancements that have been made. And you look at a guy like Tom Brady, it's like he's aging backwards. He just signed an extension with the Patriots for another 3 years. So I think that's helping players to be able to play the game a lot longer. The way that they're treating injuries and the seriousness of them and how they're, not letting guys go back out there severely injured. Yeah,
Tom Brady is a great example. And honestly, he's now kind of showing what can happen when you do take care of your body. It's really about preservation. He's been doing this not just recently, but for so many years. And he's really ahead of his time. I mean, he's 42 now. He's still, a top 10 quarterback, probably top 5 quarterback in the league. And, he just continues to go. And I don't see right now anything slowing him down, barring some major injury. It's impressive. I've talked about Tom Brady before. I'm not a Patriots fan, but, you got to admire somebody that puts that kind of time and effort into keeping his body strong and just being better than he was as a younger player. And
absolutely. I think so much of it now, too, is nutrition. And so many players are finally, understanding the importance of nutrition and the proper diet. And you can't go out there as a lineman anymore and eat burgers every day. Like I had really good friends in college who were linemen for the Penn State football team. And I'm talking like this guy would eat 11 meals a day and they were all crap. And I think you're finally seeing these guys are understanding like, hey, you can't, put the crappy gas in a Ferrari and expect it to work like a Ferrari. You have to put the good stuff in. So I think, that's another kind of example of Tom Brady and why he's been aging backwards is his nutrition and the things that he's putting in his body. It's so interesting to read about. Like the anti-inflammatory diet is so interesting to me. And also a lot of just, regular people are catching on to that because it affects just people that sit at a desk all day and, that aren't athletes because you're right. What you're putting in your body does make a difference. And if you're putting crap in, you're going to get crap out. And it does make a difference nutrition wise. Like I just did an episode about the posture of sleep, talking about how important sleep is and just better ways to actually go to sleep and stay asleep and how important it is for mental health. And it is very much about prevention. We live in a country where everybody's reactive instead of proactive. And they always wait till the bad thing happens and then, let's get it fixed now. Or I'm on the verge of surgery, doc. Can you fix me? It's never, hey, let me get checked out. Nothing really hurts, but, I wanted to get checked out and see what's going on. Yeah, that's a good point. If more people took that approach, it would be better. Like health insurance was not meant to be where you go to the doctor all the time. Catastrophe. Yeah. And you wait till a catastrophe happens, you don't use your car insurance for that. You don't want to use your car insurance because that means you've been in a car accident. Right. So if people took that more approach for their health where they kept themselves healthy and prevented it, then I think it would be the same. So I think ththese athletes are definitely going towards that. And it's good to see them where all year round they're conditioning themselves pretty well and keeping themselves in good shape and everything. Yeah, it's nice to see so many older guys still in the league and performing at a high level. Like, look at Adrian Peterson in the year he had last year, Yeah. Like that. And even James Harrison, who, I think he just retired. But, man, they were saying he was spending $300,000 a year on his body. That's insane. But, hey, it worked. A couple of years on his contract, so it pays off, right? It really did. Every week he was getting chiropractic, massage, acupuncture. He'd do cupping. He'd do PT. All this stuff. But it kept him around that he was able to be productive, close to 40. And that definitely is the trend. Switching gears, let me ask you this. So as you're covering these things, what's been the coolest thing that you've covered of all the things that you've covered for the Sidelines? Oh, geez. That's a tough question because there have been so many cool things. But for me last year, I'll tell you the best and the worst. So for me last year, the coolest thing, I had a bunch of Chiefs games and Patrick Mahomes was just that would have been cool of the season. He was incredible to watch week in and week out. And I was on the sidelines for his 50th touchdown.
Wow.
They were playing, who was it? I think it was the Raiders. They blew out the Raiders. But just to watch him come in as a second-year player and do that, he had a year behind Alex Smith to kind of learn the offense a little bit. And I think he fits in really well with Andy Reid. And, of course, he has a lot of great weapons. But just what that kid was able to do with the left-handed passes and the, sidearm and he can do it all. And just watching him week in and week out and not only, seeing what he could do on the field, but to see the kind of person and player he was off the field. He was so humble. And every week it just seemed like the pressure and the fame and the attention just never really got to him. He's just so normal and such a nice kid. So I just loved watching his story unfold last year. And I get asked so much this year, do you think he's going to be as good this season? Do you think in terms of fantasy, is he going to be as good this season? And I don't want to say no, but it's like almost as if, how do you top that? You have to expect him to regress a little bit because that was just insane. So I don't know. I think that was probably one of the coolest, stories to cover last year was just Patrick Mahomes week in and week out and what he was able to do. And then one of the worst, I was in Washington. It was Redskins against the Houston Texans when Alex Smith went down with an injury. It was just awful. I was standing right there. You could hear him scream, and it was just awful to watch. And I mean, now he's still, I think he just barely is like walking properly with, I wouldn't even say properly, but he's like sort of just getting back to the point where he can walk again. And who knows if he'll ever play again or if he'll ever be the same player again. I know that's his goal, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard to come back from an injury like that. And I think he developed some sort of infection after the first surgery and, he's had some complications with it. So I would say those are the hardest, that's the kind of the hardest part of my job is witnessing injuries like that. And then as the sideline reporter, a lot of times, their family, that was a home game, so his wife and kids were probably there. But a lot of times their families aren't there and they're watching that game on TV. And you as the sideline reporter might be the first person that they hear from in terms of filling them in on exactly what's going on and, what the diagnosis is. And, you have to be really careful and tread lightly with what you say because you might be that first, news that their family is hearing at home in terms of how they are. So it becomes really kind of complicated in how you report that. Like if I see a player being wheeled off the field and he's screaming in pain and I can see the bone sticking out of his leg and whatever, I have to now create a report that isn't going to say all that necessarily, but people tell a family, what's happened and tell the fans out there exactly what's happened without necessarily including all of those awful parts. So that was one of the worst things I had seen last year. And it's definitely one of the hardest parts of my job is just conveying those injuries. So, yeah.
Yeah. They forget that these guys are family, have families. And
they're people.
They're just people. And they have an injury like that. That would be scary as, his wife and kids are probably watching that. That's horrific to see that.
Oh my gosh, I know. And there were so many weird things about that injury. Like it was the same injury as Joe Theismann. It was on the same yard line. The final score was the same score, the same leg. It was just like so many weird, coincidences with the Theismann injury years and years ago. So that kind of made it interesting to talk about. But yeah, it's just, I think a lot of people don't think about those players and the kids that they have either, sitting in a box at the field or at home watching. And that's kind of our job as the sideline reporter to follow those players out to the ambulance and kind of get updates as to what's going on. And in that moment, the NFL is pretty hush-hush in terms of the info that they give us. So they'll say, hey, it's a right leg injury. But they're not going to say, hey, it's a compound fracture.
Yeah.
That's his tibia or whatever it is, fibula. And so you kind of have to use your eyes and ears and kind of report what you see because you're not necessarily going to get a confirmation from anyone on what those injuries are. So that's a lot of what goes into my job is, I can plan all these cool stories and reports going into a game, but a lot of times those all get thrown out the window based on what happens in the actual game with injuries and, what's going on the sideline. And if this player is fighting with this coach and, there's you just never know what's going to happen during a game. So I find that 95% of the prep and the work and the research that I do goes out the window every week. So you just never know what it's going to throw at you.
Yeah.
That's what makes it so fun.
Thank you for sharing those two things because I remember, and I'm a big Giants fan, so I do remember, Joe Theismann getting hit by Lawrence Taylor and how it related to, Alex Smith. And it was just it's crazy to see the coincidences on that. And what people don't realize is that these guys have families and they are regular people when it comes down to it.
It's awful. And Alex Smith is such a great guy, and he's a great quarterback in the league, and you just hate to see it happen to anybody. But just such a nice guy that's just, I mean, he's just so great to be around. We had met with him for our production meeting the day before, and he was in great spirits, talking about how this is going to be his best season yet. He feels better than ever and healthier than ever. And just to see that happen the next day, it's just, you feel it deeply as a person. It's just like, it hits you hard. You're like, gosh, that's just awful, and you knew his comeback, you knew his recovery was going to be long, because that's just not an injury you bounce right back from. Yeah.
And hopefully he can come back at all. It's just, that was such a bad injury.
Yeah. Yep, it'd be an interesting quarterback situation for the Redskins. They say when you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. Well, I don't know what it means when you have three quarterbacks, because you have none. So
yeah. You've been coming in and getting adjusted, and I just wanted to ask you kind of how it's affected you, with traveling and some of the things that you were dealing with. What are you feeling like now after getting adjusted for the last couple of months here? Yeah,
so good. It's so necessary for me. I spend so many hours sitting on planes in those god-awful, uncomfortable airplane seats. And then I go straight to a hotel room and I sleep in an uncomfortable hotel room bed. And, we're sitting in meetings all day. So I'm doing a lot of sitting. And then once I get to the field, I'm walking around on a lot of times the same turf that guys are getting their, ankle and feet injuries on. So I'll walk up to, 3-4 miles during a game sometimes, just walking back and forth to the sidelines. And I've definitely noticed a huge difference since I've been getting adjusted in my whole body, not just, my bottom half, but like, I know I have a lot of neck issues as well. Like I always have like a stuck neck, and I feel like I've been sleeping better, and just overall my body feels more balanced. So I got some custom orthotics in my shoes, which have been great. We're getting another pair I have a pair for my work shoes now, but I need a pair for my athletic shoes, because I've been trying to wear the work pair in the athletic shoes. And I think it's not doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So we're going to get that taken care of. But it's been awesome. Your whole office has been great. And I've definitely noticed a difference in how I feel overall. And I think in the beginning, when we looked at my x-rays, I was just shocked at how like off kilter my body was. I was crooked, and I was putting more weight on one foot than the other. And, as you mentioned, that can cause so many health problems, not just with like pain in the body, but with sleep and, everything else. So yeah, I'm feeling much better, and I'm excited to see the comparison of like the x-rays that we do down the road compared to my initial ones, because I know I have a reverse curve in my neck too. So we've definitely been working on getting that figured out.
I always wonder if people are taking in, the things that I say to them. So I appreciate that you did. And I'm so glad that you're doing better, because with you traveling so much, I knew that this would be a big part of how you could get better. We're going to take some posture pictures over you. We're going to take some new x-rays, and you're going to see some major differences. But I'm really glad to hear you're already feeling those changes and seeing the differences. And I know when you get that other pair of inserts and use them, like in tennis shoes and things like that, you're going to feel even better and more balanced. And I think that's going to be kind of the last piece of the puzzle for now, to really make that full body recovery with everything.
For sure. Yeah, I'm excited. It's good. I'm taking care of my body like a professional athlete, practicing what I preach.
Yeah. And it's going to help, I know you work out a lot. I know you're very active, so it's going to help with that too. I know. And then, but also on the other end, you're sitting a lot. And, that's a lot of the people that are listening right now, they have a desk job. They're going to be sitting, 8 to 10 hours a day, sometimes 12 hours a day. And they're slumped at a desk. And most of the people that are probably listening to this are in that category. So I'm trying to help, all aspects of this, where, not only athletes, but just people that have desk jobs, where they can really feel like they have better posture. They're taking care of their health. They're taking control of their health, and really feeling like they've made some improvements in all aspects of their life.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you brought to my attention when we first started meeting is the whole tech neck thing. Like that is something, whether you have a desk job or not, we are all glued to our phones all day long, looking down at our hands. And, I have a reverse curve in my neck. It's probably a lot from doing that. Whether I'm walking around on the sidelines or walking around anywhere, I'm usually looking down at my phone, checking my emails or my Instagram or whatever it is. I think, gosh, it's so amazing how these days we all have that, what you call tech neck, where our neck is just constantly forward, and our shoulders are then holding extra weight of our head. So
yeah, it's amazing how heavy that head can get too.
Yes, it is. I know. And it can lead to a lot of health issues too. So whether you're sitting down and your posture is terrible or not, I think the whole neck thing is really interesting.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I'm even seeing it in kids now where I have kids come in that are, 8, 10, 12 years old, and they're already looking like they're 40 or 50 because they've reversed their curve. They can't sleep. They have headaches. They're dealing with issues that health-wise, that those should be their glory years of health. There shouldn't be anything wrong with them. And they're dealing with it as a teenager, Do
you think that's all because of the tech devices?
I'm telling you, technology, it really is one of the best things that we have, but it's one of the worst things because there's no real instruction guide on how to use it, and people aren't thinking about their posture so much when they're doing it. I mean, I walk out in my waiting room and everybody that's waiting is usually on their phone slumped over. If you go to a game, a lot of times you see people like in between plays, they're on their phone looking down. Everywhere you go, everybody's looking down at their cell phones, and it's such a good thing to have, but at the same time, it's just really, it's hurting our posture, it's hurting our ability to be healthy. That I think that is a huge part of why so many people are hurting and just having health issues that they didn't realize why they should have them.
Yeah, for as many positives as it brings to our lives, there's an equal amount of negatives to not only our bodies and our physical health, but our mental health too. Geez.
Yeah,
it's a killer these days.
And I catch myself too. I mean, I'm huge into fantasy. I'm huge into sports. So I'm always, getting updates on my phone. So I have to catch myself looking at that. So one of the things I tell patients, and I've probably told you this, basically hold your phone if you can remember at eye level, where instead of looking down at that angle down, hold it up to your face where it's in front of you. Like if you had a window that you drew in front of your face, you keep the phone in there, keep the computer in there, keep the tablet in there. Even if you're reading a book, everybody slumps over reading a book, have that book up that where you're seeing that in front of you instead of slumped down. Because when I take these pictures of people's posture and their head weighs, sometimes 30, 40. I had a guy the other day, his head weighed 71 pounds.
What? How is that possible?
He was a big dude. He's a basketball player. He's 6.
Big brain.
Yep. 6'6" and 240. And his head weighed about 21 pounds to begin with. He was about 3 inches forward, and man, it just weighed his head down so big. And I told him, I said, you'd probably be 6'7" if we get your posture better. And he was all about that.
His shoulders must have just been wrenched.
Yeah, so he was hurting. His back's hurting all the time. So, we got him in. We looked at his feet. We looked at his back. So I have a plan for him to help him with sports, because he's got a shot at going overseas into Europe and possibly playing over in Europe and maybe someday in the NBA. And that's the thing is, like, if you're an athlete, whether you're a professional or not, even if you're just playing high school ball, the worst thing to happen is you get hurt and then you can't hang out with your friends. You can't play in the games and have a good time. That might be the only time you ever, play in organized sports. So you want to at least be healthy enough where you have fun and don't get hurt doing it.
Gosh, 70. I'm just trying to wrap my head around 71 pounds. I mean, I don't even take that in my suitcase over to Europe for 2 weeks. Like, that is wild.
That's a good point. Yeah. Think about if you stuck a suitcase on your shoulders and walked around all day, that's what it kind of feels like. That
is wild. Gosh.
So,
I'm glad you're helping him.
Yeah. Like when you said, you came in, and most people don't realize that. Most people don't realize that their posture's off. That, a lot of people say, oh, I have good posture. And then when we take the pictures and the x-rays, they unfortunately don't. But it's good to see it and realize that it's happening and actually have a solution to fix it, because you don't know what you don't know until you get checked out.
Sure. And I think enough people are getting chiropractic help. It's amazing how many people don't know what's out there for them in terms of just improving their health.
I hate to say it like this, but basically, if you have a spine, you need to have chiropractic care.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds cliche, but just like if you have teeth, you got to go to the dentist. And just because you go to the dentist and your teeth are good and there's no cavities doesn't mean you stop brushing your teeth.
No, and it doesn't mean you don't do the, yearly routine checkup at least. So
exactly. So same thing with your spine. All the pressures that you have, even if you're not an athlete, if you're just sitting at a desk, there's so much pressures. If you're sitting at a desk, like this guy, he's in school still in college and he's studying. You got 71 pounds on your head. You're going to be hurting at some point. Even if you're a great athlete or not, it's still going to wear you down, and it's going to predispose you to injuries.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, even just sleeping improperly can screw up your neck and your back. So
absolutely.
It just seems like more people should be in your office.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I completely agree with you on that. Listen, I've really had a great time speaking with you today, and I mean, I could talk sports forever with you. So
Thursday I'm in, so we'll talk more.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more. But I wanted to see, how people can follow you, on social media.
Of course. So I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram. Instagram and Twitter, my handle is at Melanie_Collins. So my first name, MELANIE_COLLINS. And you can follow all my fun NFL journeys this fall on both Twitter and Instagram. And week 1, I have the Colts at the Chargers. So it'll be a fun start to the year. And actually have a preseason game in 2 weeks. I've got Bills Lions. So I'm just starting to prep for that. And should be an interesting season. I'm looking forward to seeing what storylines evolve this year, who the Patrick Mahomes of this season will be.
That, and you'll be able to see Andrew Luck and see if he's back to normal at that point.
Yes, I will.
He's going to possibly get injured.
That will be very interesting to follow and see. He's had such a history of injuries, and I know last year when I met with him, and he had just recovered from that shoulder surgery. He said he had spent not this past Thanksgiving, but the one before, rehabbing in the Netherlands, and there was a point where he wondered if he'd ever play football again. He was so depressed and he wasn't sure if he was ever going to be the same player. And he was like, I didn't think I was ever going to play again. And then he comes back last year and has this incredible bounce back year. So I'm hoping that if he can get that calf healthy or whatever's going on with him, I would expect a big season out of him. Like he's a top 3, top 5 fantasy quarterback in my mind this year if he can, get that.
It's going to be interesting to see that. And, like I said, I'm a big fantasy player. I think I've added a 5th. Don't tell my wife, but I think I'm in 5 fantasy football leagues this year.
Addiction for you, full blown addiction.
So I'm definitely knee deep in this, and I enjoy it because I like the challenge. First of all,
it's so fun.
It's so much fun, and I love to talk smack with my friends. I've been in some leagues for almost 20 years with some of my high school friends that we're still in these leagues together. And it's honestly, it keeps us going because it's one of the few things we really have, because a lot of us live all over the country, but it keeps us kind of connected.
One thing you guys still have in common to talk to each other each week. And do you guys have I always love asking this question to people in fantasy leagues. Do you have a punishment for the league loser?
Yes, we do.
Let's hear it.
I've never had to do it because I'm usually in the upper half.
Of course.
But even if I have a bad season, I'm usually in the middle of the pack. But the loser each year has to go in the middle of the winter and jump in the canal.
Oh my God!
So all of them live up in New York, and so whoever loses, who has the worst record, has to in the middle of December, January, February, has to jump in the canal and stay in there for 5 minutes.
Oh my God! I love it. That's a great punishment. Hopefully, you get it on film every year.
Yeah, so we've filmed those and we've thought about doing. I know some leagues do some crazy things, like they'll tattoo something crazy on your body, or they'll make you stand out in the street.
Yep.
Stand out in the street in a dress and hold a sign that I suck at fantasy football. Or
so good. There's always a new one every year that I'll laugh for 5 minutes about. It's so good. The stuff people come up with. So
we've been doing that for a long time. So they do the like the polar plunge basically is your punishment.
Love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So I'm looking forward to that. So we're going to be drafting here in probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right at the beginning of September or the end of August. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that big time.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what your team looks. Well, your 5 teams look like.
Yeah.
After the drafts.
Yeah, I've told the listeners I'll be going over that throughout the year. I'll kind of tell how I'm doing. Like I'm in baseball right now, and I'm 14-2.
Wow.
Actually 14-3. So I've done pretty well in that league, and hopefully I've had some injuries to some of my pitchers this week, but I'm hoping in a couple weeks when the playoff starts that we'll be good to go, and I don't have to try to piece together some scrubs just to hope that I can fill their spots. So I'm looking forward to that, and I really want to win that league because obviously I like to win.
Well, we all do, of course. Fingers crossed for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is that whether you're an athlete or not, the whole idea about sporting good posture is really to help you have better health. It's going to help you in whether you sit at a desk or you're running a marathon. And I want people to know that that is the basis of health. The better your posture, the better your health. And if there's an underlying issue, it's better to get checked out than try to worry about if you're predisposed to injury. If you start a running program, if you start a workout program and you get injured, unfortunately, it's going to happen more often than you want it to because there was usually something predisposing you. Melanie's come in. She was saying, she didn't realize that all these things were going on. This basketball player that came in didn't realize, his head's weighing 71 pounds and why his neck always hurts and his back always hurts. But these are very common. Unfortunately, they're common, but they're not normal. And it's something that you can address and actually, return your body to the actual good position that it should be. And posture really is the basis of your health. And I'm building the ultimate fantasy team, and I want you to be a part of it. I want you to come in my practice, and I want to help you whatever aspect of life that you want to get better at. I want to be there for you to do that. So for those of you out there listening, keep track of what's going on with your health. Reach out to me, at Sporting Good Posture on Instagram, and tell me what you have going on, and I'll tell you what I think. I have some other episodes coming out. I just did the posture sleep as well. That'll be coming out this month. Again, thank you, Melanie, for taking the time out today. I know you're really busy with football season coming up, and I really had a good time talking to you today.
Me too. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This is Coach Marghella. I'm Sporting Good Posture. How about you?
The Sporting Good Posture podcast is a broadcast wellness production powered by Ideal Health and Wellness Center. All content copyright 2019, all rights reserved. Executive producer Frank Sardella. Dr. Marghella appears courtesy of Ideal Health and Wellness Center in Cool Springs. For more information, visit sportinggoodposture.com or follow Coach on Instagram at sportinggoodposture.
Like the sideline reporter in you, Melanie, how you turned it around on Frank a couple of times and were interviewing him.
I like it to be more conversational that way,
Love it. No, it was
That's good. It's probably one of the best episodes.